Alright, in today's video we're going to be changing out the two radiator hoses on my 1999 Toyota 4Runner. Now, I just recently did the water pump and timing belt on this, and as I was putting it back together and I cranked it up for the first time, I noticed that these radiator hoses were leaking, and you can actually see some dried up coolant right there on the timing cover. So I decided I'd order some new ones and go ahead and replace them. So there's one up top here, and there is a second one down in back. We'll get a better view at it later, but it's down in there. Now I picked up these hoses online. They were about 50 bucks. It was about the cheapest I could find. Toyota hoses. So here's our part number. Now this is going to be the top hose, and then here is the bottom hose right in here. So we're just going to go ahead and slap these in, and it's a relatively easy process. We're going to have to go ahead and take off the skid plate, which is just a few 12mm bolts. Then we'll go ahead and slide our bucket down underneath, and we will drain the radiator. Once the radiator is completely drained, we can go ahead and take those hoses off, which should be pretty simple. They may have a little bit of fluid left in them, so we'll have to be careful of that so not to spill it all over the engine. And then after that, I'll be reusing the fluid since I just recently put it in there. So I've got a clean bucket out, and then we'll go ahead, slap on the new hoses, and then we'll refill it with the fluid that we took out in the first. So now we're underneath the vehicle, and I only have 3 bolts for my skid plates, but that is one. Here's the second, and here is the third. Now normally you would actually have 5, so one there, one on the flip side over here, and then you'd have 3 up front, but since this is the lightweight fuel efficient vehicle, I only have 3. So let's go ahead and take those off. Alright, so we got the skid plate off. There are the 3 12mm bolts, and here is the underside. And we can see this one radiator hose down here on the bottom of the radiator. You can actually see a little drip of coolant coming off of that right now. And also, it's hard to tell on the camera, but just up there is the other top of the radiator hose, and you can actually see that white residue is from the dried coolant that is leaked out right there. So let's go ahead and drain the pepcock valve, which is right over here. We're going to go ahead and line up our little wooden table under here, slap the bucket underneath, and drain out the radiator fluid out of this pepcock valve. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and drain out the coolant. So again, we're going to be opening up the pepcock valve, and you want to be careful. If your engine is hot, you know, all of this fluid is going to be pretty hot. Now I have not been running my vehicle, so it should be relatively cool. But you also want to be careful. You don't want to take it all the way out, because you're just going to shoot a stream of coolant way away from whatever catch bucket that you have, and that's just going to lead to a whole another mess. So what I like to do is just, you know, get a nice little stream going, and I'll just leave it here, and I'll go ahead and open up the radiator cap again because the vehicle is not warm, and I'll let the air flow through the radiator so it drains just a little bit quicker. Alright, now that we got the radiator drained, I went ahead and put the pepcock valve back in. Now I'm going to go ahead and take off this constant tension clamp and go ahead and move the bucket over or whatever you're catching the fluid in, because there's going to be a little bit of residual fluid in this tube. A lot of residual fluid. Alright, now that we've gotten that bottom clamp off, our next one is up top here, right here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that off and then remove this hosing from this water pump inlet neck. And there might be a little bit of coolant in there as well. So I went ahead and moved the catch basin back to catch any of the fluid that comes out of there. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and take off the top radiator hose. Now, with these hoses, they're actually labeled, and you can see on this one which way is going to be towards the engine and which way will be towards the radiator. So the yellow is to the engine and the white is to the radiator. Now, when I went to go put this back on, the paint mark had wiped off of this old radiator hose. So I just put it back on the same way that I took it off, and this is actually backwards. So it'll go on something like this, and you can see the difference. Now on mine, the tension clamps are not there, so we just kind of have this little hose clamp, which is an 8mm, just like a little flathead screwdriver. So we're going to go ahead and get that off. Alright, so now here we have the new radiator hose. Remember, we're going to go yellow to the engine side and then the white to the radiator. So we're going to go ahead and wiggle on one side. It's going to be a lot more snug than the old one. Just kind of wiggle it on. Alright, so there we have that one. And then we'll do the same for the radiator side. This one should be a little bit easier, maybe. There we go. We'll slide this clamp over. Alright, so there we go. New radiator hose in place. Yellow to the engine, white to the radiator. Now we can move on and do this lower one. Be a little bit more tough, but we'll get it done. Alright, so we got the new hose in. You can see it right on down there. The tension clamps are a bit tough to get in. I would suggest as you put them on, line them up so that it's easy to get to with the pliers from the top side of the engine, so that way you can slide it over the little lip on this water pump neck line coming out. Makes it a little bit easier. And then on the bottom, same kind of deal. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and fill up the radiator. So we have our bucket of coolant that we drained, and again, this is relatively new coolant, so I just want to reuse it. There is a little bit of debris in the bottom that just didn't get flushed out when I flushed it last time. Some people recommend to strain it through a coffee filter. I'm not going to do that. I'm not too worried about it. It's not really a lot. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and lift this up and pour it into the radiator. It's good to have a buddy that can help you along. But we're going to go ahead and do that slowly because the system will burp. So don't pour it all really quick. You'll end up with a big mess. Alright, so let's say you don't have a friend, you just have to do this by yourself. You can always sling your bucket up here onto the engine bay, and then just using some simple physics, get the fluid going through the line, and as long as it is lower than the bucket itself, it should draw itself into the radiator. And it'll slowly trickle itself into the radiator. Might take all day.
I'll see you next year.
Alright, so now as the radiator is filling up, I went ahead and threw the skid plate back on. So remember, you got your 12mm bolts. Normally there'd be 5, but again, this is the high fuel efficiency vehicle, so we only have 3. But we got the skid plate back on, so the last thing to do is really just to let that radiator fill up. Probably just going to go ahead and use a funnel here in a minute, but then just go ahead and make sure there are no leaks underneath the vehicle or where we have those hoses connected, and then crank her over and check for leaks. Alright, now we have refilled the radiator. Did have some problems just burping the system as we went along. Probably should have ran it a couple more times as we were filling it. The overflow is filled, so if there are still some air pockets in the radiator, it'll draw from the overflow tank, and then I'll just monitor that and see if it goes down a good bit, and then I'll just refill it up to the proper level. So far, I've ran it for just a little bit of time, not seeing any leaks underneath this hose, so that's good. No leaks over here as well, and then same down on the bottom, no leaks. So hopefully this job is done and I will not have to be revisiting any sort of coolant leak problem. So I'll catch you guys in the next one.